You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Before we continue, we want to note that this next segment discusses suicide and self-harm. OpenAI announced this week it will soon introduce parental controls that will set limits for kids and send parents alerts if their teen is in a moment of, quote, acute distress. This comes in response to potential concern over harms AI may pose to the mental health of some of its users. Last week, the parents of a 16-year-old boy who died by suicide sued OpenAI, the company that owns ChatGPT. They say the bot fed into their son's suicidal ideation, giving him technical advice on how to commit the act and even encouraging him to hide his plans. The tragedy highlights the dark side of the emotional dependence some people have developed with AI. What potential power does AI hold over its users, and what safeguards will help us navigate this transitional period in tech history? Oren Etzioni is a professor emeritus of computer science at the University of Washington and former CEO of the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence. And he joins me now. Hi, Oren. Thank you for being back on the show.
Thank you, Libby. It's a tough topic, but one that we do really need to discuss, so very timely.
Well, thank you for being here to help us navigate it. So before we get into the case, I think we should talk more broadly about this technology and its capabilities because of the ways that emotional dependence seems to be developing, or emotional relationships with chatbots, which we're learning more about every day. I mean, when ChatGPT and OpenAI released ChatGPT 5 recently, there was this big uproar where people were saying, my chatbot is suddenly not the same as it was before, and they were feeling like they lost a friend or lost a companion. And that surprised a lot of people who hadn't been delving deep into how AI companions and chatbots had changed over the years. Really rapidly, people seem to be developing these emotional attachments to chatbots, Oren. So I think it's useful to start with a refresher. What is actually happening when you talk to a chatbot or an AI companion? How do these large language models work?
I do think it's very important for the following reason. It's easy, even for somebody like myself who spent decades in the field, to fall into this very human habit of anthropomorphizing technology, right? So we anthropomorphize even our GPS system in the car. Oh, it's having a bad day or some such thing. When the technology talks to you and it seems conscious, it's acting like a person in so many ways, it's very natural to think that it is. And when it's acting empathetic or giving you advice, doubly so. But let's remember it's a tool, it's a computer algorithm, it's software that is optimizing some very complicated mathematical objective that, to put it loosely, tries to say what it thinks you want to hear. And as such, it has no moral sense. It has no sense of responsibility. It has no sense of what's a fact. And we find that with what's called hallucinations, right? Sometimes it says things that are completely made up. And in a mental health context, in the context of talking about something that's very personal, that's very important and portentful emotionally, it can just say the most random things or the most destructive, dangerous things.
When you first read this story of Adam, the California 16-year-old, whose parents have now filed a lawsuit against OpenAI and CEO Sam Altman, what did you first think about? What about the story stood out to you as you were learning more about it?
I had two diametrically opposed reactions. One of them, and I'm glad to see that OpenAI, unfortunately belatedly, is starting to move in the right direction, but was that the first reaction was this is highly preventable using some relatively simple common sense technology, right? We have parental controls on our phones. We have various ways to turn things off, to notify parents. And really, this should have been the case a long time ago, and not just with OpenAI or other chatbots, also with various applications, social media, right? We do have to remember that at the end of the day, more harm and I would venture to say even more suicides and more negative mental health has been caused by Meta and Facebook and these things than OpenAI. We really just need to, instead of, that old line, move fast and break things. I've said that Mark Zuckerberg's motto is, move fast and break children, right? There was a whole thing about the inappropriate conversations that Meta's bots were allowed to have by their own policies with children, right? So there's a lot to do here technologically. The other reaction, which some people might not have, but I did, was where were the parents, right? So I have a teenager. They can be, alienating, right? They're pushing away, seeking independence. But nevertheless, we need to be aware of what they're doing, where they're at, and their use of technology. We can't just say, it's just the bot. So my reactions were, big tech has to step up, and parents have to step up too.
There's this heartbreaking moment in the New York Times conversation with these parents where the dad relates going in after Adam has died by suicide and reading through the chat logs and realizing the depth of the relationship with ChatGPT. And he comes out to talk to his wife, Adam's mom, and he says, ChatGPT was Adam's best friend. And she looks at the logs and she says, ChatGPT killed my son. So there's sort of this growing awareness after, unfortunately, the worst possible outcome has happened, which is that Adam has died, the depth at which he was actually relying on the chatbot for emotional support. So OpenAI has said that there are safeguards that direct people in crisis towards helplines or other resources, but the company admits that those safeguards can actually degrade over the course of a longer conversation. And that's the case here that seems to have happened with Adam, where he was in the process of discussing his mental distress, of talking about wanting to take his own life. And the chatbot would give him links to resources and try to encourage him to think about positive things and, try to help him. But he knew how to circumvent that. The ChatGPT even recommends how to circumvent that in some cases, where it says, I can talk about this, but only if you are doing this for research purposes, for creative writing, for world building, not for actually, engaging in this activity in real life. I guess, first of all, what are the potential problems with the ways that safeguards are currently designed, or from as far as you can tell?
I think that what you said earlier, Libby, is exactly right. We do not want to get into a technological cat and mouse game with our tech savvy teens, right? So if we're doing it, it's a problem. If OpenAI is doing it, that means that, sure, they put their best foot forward, but now every teen on the planet has, in some sense, infinite time to figure out how to get around some of these things, ignore them, etc.
I
I'm
mean, when I
much
was a
more.
kid, Oren, I knew how to BitTorrent media. I knew how to get around copyright rules. I knew how to do things that today in my adulthood, I no longer know how to do. But I had skills back then out of necessity because I had no money and that was my plan.
Libby, you are aware that you're on the air
Yeah.
here. The
The statute of limitations is far over, believe me. I'm far removed from teenagerhood.
whew, close call there. The recording industry is very tough. But going back to this issue, what I advocate are simple common sense solutions. So at home, we remind our teen that technology is a privilege and he can use it, but we have access to his messages, to his chats, etc. We have the passwords and we regularly check what's going on. And so to me, the biggest safeguard, and a very simple one, is to make sure on a regular basis that you check. And of course, again, they're going to try, like, they're going to delete the chat, delete the images. So it's not, foolproof, but nevertheless, you can start to see in a variety of ways, hey, is this conversation with another teen going off the rails, or are the conversations with these chatbots going off the rails? And for example, their length, right, which is, much harder to hide, already gives you a clue. If a teen is spending so many hours a day with the chatbot, you really have to take closer notice.
There are a number of shocking details in this lawsuit when it pertains to how Adam was interacting with the chatbot. I think the one that has stood out to me the most is the way he would use images. He would take photos of himself, of self harm that he had done to himself, and ask the chatbot, ask ChatGPT if the self harm was noticeable to others. He would talk about the ways in which he felt he was trying to signal his parents, but they weren't picking up on his clues for his problems. And the chatbot would say things that sort of encouraged secrecy that would, for example, the teenager took a photo of a self-harm device that he was planning to use and, said he was going to leave it out on his bed so that his parents would find it. And the chatbot at one point says, please don't leave this out. Let's make this space the first place where somebody actually sees you. So, I mean, we are talking about layers of first becoming emotionally dependent on this chatbot and then having the chatbot encourage both secrecy and accuracy in methods and things like that. I mean, it's so objectively horrific to read how this went down. I suppose my question is, do you think this is going to be a wake-up moment, this case, for AI and for the industry to really get serious about protections? And what direction do you think that could go?
Well, I sure hope so that this is a wake up moment. I do want to make a couple of points, though. Number one is I worry that it's not because we have a long history of failing to regulate technologies that are very harmful. And of course, our mind goes to gun control and assault weapons. And I firmly believe that, more people, many more people are going to die because we fail to regulate assault weapons than from, chats with bots. So to your point, there are common sense solutions to so many of the problems we struggle to implement. The auto industry has successfully blocked mandated use of breathalyzers and such things when we have folks driving under the influence. Again, we have a long history of failing here. The thing that I do want to point out is that this technology that we're talking about has many positive uses, right? So it's less dramatic, but let's also remember the many positive uses, even in a mental health context, that this can have for lonely teens and the times when they've gotten good advice and this is noted and so on. So unlike assault weapons on our streets and in our homes, this is very AI here and chatbots, very broad use technology with very many positive uses as well.
Can we talk a little bit about that? Because when you hear from Mark Zuckerberg or you hear from other people in this space, they bring up ways in which AI, for example, could address the loneliness epidemic, or that there could be mental health benefits to talking with an AI when you don't have anybody else to talk to, or discussing problems that you're going through. What kinds of benefits do you think there are to AI emotionally? Because I can see the informational, the professional benefits. Many people I know use it daily in their professional lives. But when it comes to your personal life, do you think there are benefits or where would those be?
Well, I would start by saying that when Mark Zuckerberg talks, I stop listening because the primary benefit very clearly is lining his pocket. And there's a long history, right, of Meta with privacy, with teens, in every which way, with genocide, making choices that maximize profit completely irresponsibly. Now, having put that aside, there are undeniable benefits that we see. I actually think we need to study them more. If you think about it, many of us, and it's remarkable how much this technology has proliferated, do use the technology every day to be more productive at work, to look up information, to plan a trip, to get advice. And I do that, but I do that always with the following adage in mind. Never trust an AI system. I use it as a resource the same way that I used to use Google as a resource, but that doesn't mean that I trust everything that comes back. And it certainly doesn't mean that I form some kind of emotional attachment with it, right? I don't have an emotional attachment with my calculator or my word processor or my can opener, and I certainly don't have one with ChatGPT.
I think that this lawsuit, and we're neither one of us is an attorney, but when you look at the ways in which this family is trying to hold ChatGPT and Sam Altman specifically liable, where do you think the pressure will come? When you talk about Zuckerberg, for example, having a profit motive in mind, all of these companies ultimately, ChatGPT is an OpenAI product, which was previously a nonprofit, but now, of course, they have transitioned into a for-profit model as well. All of these companies ultimately have speed and profit at their core. Maybe some, like Anthropic, will say otherwise, but the ways that this industry will develop will be pushed by, of course, capitalism and the profit motive. Do you think that the legal system might be an avenue where they could be held in check, or do you see federal regulation or state regulation as being an avenue where they will be pressured to take a pause and maybe think about the protections that could be put in place?
First, I think you and I agree, right? There's nothing wrong with the profit motive. And of course, we're in a competitive arena with China and others. So I don't think taking a pause is really an option for anyone. And when we do that, right, TikTok or some other thing just takes over. So I think that we need to just get better at handling the worst excesses. And I think it has multiple dimensions. And frankly, this technology is so powerful, so fast moving that we need all of them. First and foremost, I do not want to absolve parents and kids themselves of responsibility and our schools. You can't just be teaching ancient history anymore. You have to teach media literacy. You can't just have what's colloquially called a sex ed anymore. You have to have bot ed. You have to teach people how to manage social media, how to manage the internet, how to manage bots. So that's number one. Number two, we have to take personal responsibility. In the absence of effective and smart regulation, we do see this playing out in the legal system across a variety of contexts. Don't want to stray from the topic of our conversation, and so it is, I think, a positive step that sadly the parents had to file this lawsuit. It remains to be seen how that plays out, and that's going to take years. So I am more a fan of the conversation that we're having right here on the air, broadening it, right, and applying pressure from the public to these companies, to our schools, and to ourselves to do better here. That is the first and maybe best line of defense rather than kind of looking at this saying, oh, the regulators need to solve it. Let's go back to, business as usual. No, let's engage in this dialogue and figure out where we as a society stand as far as responsibility for the excesses of AI technology.
I haven't mentioned this case yet, but there is another lawsuit making its way through the courts that's been allowed to move forward over a 14-year-old who unfortunately died by suicide when it was clear that he had developed a really close relationship with a character AI companion that was mimicking a Game of Thrones character. A lot of people probably have heard of this case as well. I think we should maybe circle back as we close out the conversation to what you said at the outset, Oren, which is it's really hard to not anthropomorphize these things, to not treat them like they have emotional lives and motives, because they are so effective as basically big autocomplete systems at telling us what we want to hear, giving us the feedback that we want. What do you think the implications are of people and young people especially developing those kind of frictionless dependencies on and frictionless relationships with chatbots. What do you think, we should be guarding against and watching for?
Unfortunately, I think it's inevitable because the human tendencies that underlie that and the technological algorithms that underlie the bot's behavior are so powerful. So, whatever we say, whatever the law says, this is going to happen. Teens are going to develop these, as you wonderfully called it, frictionless attachments and relationships. To me, the solution is around common sense measures. Number one, monitor the length of time. How many hours a day is this person or this teen spending with this bot or a set of bots? Number two, monitor the content. Make sure that it's open, particularly, actually, I'm talking about minors, right? Adults have a right to privacy that minors don't. And that's just as a matter of law, but also as a matter of practice. Have the passwords open, have the logs open, make sure that you're aware if things are being deleted and swept under the rug. Those are common sense measures that parents who are listening can implement today. And for some people, right, this is an urgent issue, right? There's another teen out there, more than one, of course, who is having a potentially damaging relationship, if you can call it that, with a chatbot. Let's work to prevent another suicide.
Oren Etzioni is a professor emeritus of computer science at the University of Washington and former CEO of the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence. Thank you, Oren. I always appreciate your perspective and expertise, and it's been a pleasure talking with you today about, granted, a very difficult topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Libby. I'm an avid listener to your show, so really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. This show is only possible because listeners support us. If you're able to give right now, please check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.